President Trump calls out Democrats. And lastly, U.S. and China begin talking about the trade war. This is A Better World, and I'm your host, Luis Acevedo. As we all know, New York Democrats have recently passed a piece of legislation that would allow women to receive late-term abortions if it will impose a risk on their health. Well, Virginia state Democrats have just made a move to pass the same legislation. Democratic Virginia delegate Kathy Tran introduced House Bill number 2491, which allows women to get an abortion up until the point they give birth, up until the very second they're going to give birth. Yesterday, on the 30th, the Virginia governor, Ralph Northam, had an interview with a local radio show regarding this piece of legislation, and here's what he has to say about it.
No exception. There was a very contentious committee hearing yesterday when Fairfax County Delegate Kathy Tran made her case for lifting restrictions on third trimester abortions as well as other restrictions now in place. And she was pressed by a Republican delegate about whether her bill would permit an abortion even as a woman is essentially dilating, ready to give birth. And she answered that it would permit an abortion at that stage of labor. Do you support her measure and explain her answer?
Yeah, I wasn't there, Julie, and I certainly can't speak for Delegate Tran, but I would tell you, first thing I would say, this is why decisions such as this should be made by providers, physicians, and the mothers and fathers that are involved. There are, when we talk about third trimester abortions, these are done with the consent of obviously the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion. But again,
Okay, we'll go ahead and stop it there because I want to tackle something which he said during this interview, and that is they would resuscitate the infant if that's what the mother and father desired. Shows us a few things here. One of the things it shows us is that if the mother and father, or simply take the father out of the equation because it's the mother's body, it's the woman's body, he has no say in that, which is the main argument, or at least part of the main argument, the pro-choice makes. Another thing that it shows us is that a mother has a choice to kill the baby after birth. What happens if she tells the doctor not to resuscitate? The doctor will then proceed to kill the baby. But remember, like the governor said, the infant will be comfortable. So that should give us all a little peace of mind, shouldn't it? This is disgusting. This is really, really disgusting. And all of this led to a tweet by President Trump, which maybe should be used in part of his campaign in 2020. And the tweet was, Democrats are becoming the party of late-term abortion, high taxes, open borders, and crime. The first part is completely understandable after seeing what the two state legislatures have done. As for the second part, this too is obvious. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said in a 60-minute interview that she would like a 70% tax on the wealthiest of the country. We have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren also talking about a wealth tax. On top of this, the new class of the Democratic congressmen have proposed, Congress members rather, have proposed free stuff for all, which will inevitably result in the little guys, you and I, paying more in taxes. Bottom line is, forced altruism hurts the greater population rather than helps it. Now, the last part of that tweet we have to talk about we would have to talk about for now. The last part of the tweet that we're going to talk about for a minute. Sorry, it took me a a lot of effort to get that sentence out. So there is no other way to slice it. Democrats really do want open borders, and with that will come crime. That's inseparable. We've talked about this a lot in various episodes that I've made. Now, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, said in a press conference today that, quote, "there's not going to be any wall money in the legislation," unquote. This comes amid a bipartisan meeting that took place Wednesday where House Appropriation Committee Chairwoman Nate Lowey, a Democrat of New York, said the following: "We will expand on the $1.6 billion for border security related programs that House Democrats have already passed," unquote. Although they have finally come to the table and started negotiations, they are still unwilling to provide funding for a wall. Despite the fact that there is no wall money, they have proposed to add 1,000 new custom officers, funding new image technology to scan cars and trucks at ports of entry, and boosting resources related to migrants being held in custody. It would also focus on alternatives to ICE detention programs. The latter part really concerns me because we have the new faces of the Democratic Party all supporting abolishing ICE. So this may be some incremental steps to do just that. Another Democrat in the meeting, Henry Cuellar, alluded to an alternative to a physical wall that would be a compromise Democrats might like, and that is using vehicle barriers. He said the following: hint, hint, 300 miles of vehicle barriers. There's ways to get what we need. I am aware that there are 300 miles of vehicle barriers along the border, but they aren't as effective as an actual barrier. Would it be easier to climb a physical barrier than a vehicle barrier? Which would be easier? I think it would be easier to climb over a vehicle barrier and damage the vehicle barrier to the point where it is no longer effective. That is very hard to do for a wall unless you're declaring war on our country and you start firing tank missiles at it. That's really the only way that you would destroy it, is if you essentially declare active war on our country, which you could say is happening with the vehicle barriers if they break them and jump over them. However, it's not as intense as what you would have to do to tear down a physical barrier. Now, Republicans in this meeting are standing strongly behind Trump on an actual border wall. Republican Senator Richard Shelby, who chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee, said the following: "Our Border Patrol tells us that they need physical barriers to help them do their job, not from coast to coast, but strategically placed where traffic is highest." It baffles me that Democrats are willing to discard what people who actually work to secure our borders are saying about the need for a physical barrier, not vehicle barriers or just more technology. And Representative Dan Crenshaw made a good point on this as well when he tweeted out something along the line saying, "Technology will only help us detect those who cross the border illegally, but a wall with technology will help us prevent people from crossing over the border and better securing that part of the border with needed agents." A lot of issues with the wall, a lot of the issue with the wall has to do with Trump branding it his. This is something Republicans and himself are coming to realize. Representative Tom Graves said the following: "I suspect we might have some discussions about terminology and words we use." That's exactly right. We know that Democrats voted for the expansion of border walls during both the Obama and Bush tenure. So the only reason for them to oppose more expansion this time is because Trump branded it his wall, which, if he gets it, is a political win for him. Representative Sean Duffy was on Lou Dobbs tonight, and he was exactly right that if Trump declares a national emergency, they will probably overturn it in the courts, and if Democrats win this battle, they have a really good chance at winning 2020. A new poll from Ear to Ground shows just that. It surveyed 2,700 people, they were all Trump supporters, and found that if Trump fails to secure border security funds, his support will drop by 43%. The poll also shows that 95% of those people surveyed would support him if he declared a national emergency. What this shows is that if there is no wall or money for the wall by 2020, then Trump will more than likely lose re-election. With the branding of the wall in mind, the president has tweeted out, quote, "Let's just call them walls from now on and stop playing political games. A wall is a wall." He's exactly right to do that, although, in my opinion, he is at least slightly responsible for making this a political game by branding it his wall, by claiming he was going to make a wall. He made it seem as if we have no walls on the southern border when he was campaigning, and that is in part a lot of the reason why he was elected. The wall's branded to his name, and now he's trying to separate that, which is a smart move, although he's not completely innocent of those games. However, regardless of that, this is the right move for him to do. This is a wall for America, not Trump. We already know that when he talks about the wall, he wins more support for it. So, take his name off of it and call it America's Wall. They have until February 15th to come to an agreement. At that time, a few things might happen. First, the Democrats, which would be, in my opinion, the only way for Trump to get the wall, will compromise and agree to funding for the wall. The second would be they don't compromise and the government shuts down again. Then we go through exactly the same process we went through this time, which may work in our favor because as the government shutdown continued, it showed Nancy Pelosi in polls being the least favorite politician during the course of the shutdown, and Democrats shouldering amongst the general population almost the same amount of blame as Republicans. So that may work, although I think people are tired of that. So it may not. The last option, the last thing that could happen out of this would be that they don't compromise and Trump declares a national emergency, which his son, Eric Trump, has said he should do. And as we see in that survey from Ear to the Ground, 95% of his supporters in the survey would support him in declaring a national emergency. We've talked about that on the show a couple times now, and my stance is he will lose that battle. And that is why I think the only way for him to get the border funding for the border wall is if Democrats compromise on their position, put politics aside, and come to a bipartisan agreement on funding for the wall. That's the only way. Only way. But like I said, we'll have to wait until February 15th to see exactly what happens. Those are my predictions as to the three options that will occur. Ultimately, I believe that Democrats will probably come around. I do believe that simply because we have seen already during the course of that shutdown, Democrats drifting away from the party message to completely disregard anything to do with the wall. Despite Nancy Pelosi's words at the press conference today, I still have some hope, some faith that Democrats will come to the table and compromise on their position with the border wall. Maybe the way for that to happen would be for DACA. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what would need to take place, but I have hope that we will come to some bipartisan agreement. Meanwhile, the United States and China have begun talking about the trade war. The talks are taking place next door to the White House, with roughly a month left in the 90-day truce, reports Reuters. These talks have been led by Chinese Vice Premier Liu He and U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. So far, China has denied the main allegations launched at them regarding coercion of technology in a campaign to acquire U.S. technology firms. If you recall, that was the main reason for the trade wars in the first place, which resulted in Trump imposing $250 billion worth of Chinese imports. Although Chinese officials deny these claims, they have already made concessions by reducing auto tariffs and drafting foreign investment law that improves access for foreign firms and promises to outlaw administrative means to force the transfer of technology, reports Reuters. Now, President Trump said that no deal could be made unless China opens their market, quote, looking for China to open their markets not only to financial services, which they are doing, but also to our manufacturing, farmers, and other U.S. businesses and industries. Without this, a deal would be unacceptable. And that's what he tweeted out today. A move like this would require a structural change to the Chinese government. They would no longer be able to function as a communist state if they opened up the markets. And that would be great for everyone, but let's be real. That will not happen, at least now, or at least anytime soon, especially with President Xi Jinping becoming the president for life, rechanging their constitution so that way he can essentially be the dictator until he dies. Now, him and President Trump are planning to meet to hopefully resolve this issue. And I could see President Trump trying to convince President Xi that opening up the markets would be extremely beneficial to their economy and the Chinese people as a whole. This may resonate with the president of China a little bit simply because their markets, their economy as a whole is not doing that great, especially with the trade wars. We've talked about this too. The trade wars have negatively affected the Chinese economy. Their currency is becoming less valuable. Their manufacturing sectors are declining. Their overall productivity is declining as well. And even before the trade war took into effect, their economy was cooling off. So there's a lot of reasons as to why they should go to an open market to help take some of the stress off of the government to control everything and keep their people from uprising against their government since they are in complete control. So it would be a beneficial move for everybody, although it's more than likely wishful thinking that the Chinese government will give up their stranglehold on the country, since historically that has been what most, if not all, their governments have done. But what I think we should focus on right now is addressing the intellectual property theft and spying that China has been doing not only to the U.S., but to other Western countries, especially after a UN panel that published a report today saying U.S. and China are at the front of the global competitors in the study and development of AI, per an article from The Hill. Say what you will about the American government spying on its citizens, but our government is not nearly as intrusive nor as dictatorial as the Chinese government. It is no secret China has infiltrated our colleges and universities, as we've talked about in prior episodes with the Confucius institutions, and their cyber theft, which both FBI and Homeland Security state are more of a threat than any other country. And I ask the question again, why do we still talk about Russia? I don't know. With that, it is safe to assume China is only able to compete in the AI realm with us because they are cheating their way to the top by stealing a lot of our technology. This isn't a secret either. This is something we've covered extensively in this podcast. And with that, I believe a fruitful discussion that can come out of the trade wars, the talk for the trade negotiations that's going on, would be to hammer down on the intellectual property theft, the cyber theft, the spying, etc. And then, if that happens, maybe we can slow up China's pace as far as developing AI. At least to the point where we can ensure that we're paving the way for AI and not them. Because who wants a government that literally judges your every move and imprisons citizens because of their religious beliefs to be at the forefront of AI? No one in their right mind would want that. Hopefully, there can be some positive things that come out of these talks. And with Trump meeting President Xi. Hopefully, that can even more ensure something to come out that's beneficial not only for the United States, but also for the people of China. So all we can do is wait and see what's going to happen between these two talks. They're both very important. One's on border security, the other is national security and foreign security as well. China's not only targeting the U.S., China's targeting other Western countries and their own citizens. So these are very important issues to be aware of. So we'll keep you in the loop as I have been throughout the whole podcast. So we will see you again tomorrow, and have a great rest of your day, and stay warm because it's really cold outside. So be sure to stay warm. All right. Peace.